welcome back to the Parliament. After a couple of years and the substitute in the Hofburg, the Imperial Palace, it is wonderful to be back here in the Parliament on the Ring with the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium. So 10 years ago, it was launched here by Gabi Heinrich-Hossek, among others, and it is still filling big rooms and halls. This is really an exceptional achievement. And we're really overwhelmed, so this is off the record. Dear Eva Maria Holzleitner, you are the organizer of the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium, so I would like to ask you to join me on the stage, because this is really exceptional to have two rooms here in the Parliament that are full of people, and we're also broadcasting this via live stream. So I can only say thank you to everybody who's here, to all those who are also participating in the second room in the Parliament, to all those who are following us via the live stream. We are really overwhelmed that this legacy of Barbara Prammer is supported by so many participants in this symposium. They are honoring her by their presence, and this has been made possible by so many employees and co-workers that we organized this event in this wonderful setting. So I'd like to thank all those who have done a wonderful job preparing this and organizing this event. Big round of applause. And the fact that we're here where Barbara Prammer worked as the president of the National Council, also Doris Bures, another president of the National Council, they are witness to show that the importance of our parliamentarism and democracy are still upheld. In a year such as 2024, this is more important than ever before, and this is why it is good to know that we have Democrats here, such as Doris Bures, who has always fully supported this event and continues to support it on the occasion of this 10th anniversary. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful, intensive days of networking, a lot of encounters, also during the lunch break, where we are also going to get together. All the other rooms are going to get together, and this networking idea will be promoted. Thank you. Thank you, dear Eva Maria Holzleitner. So it was important to us to ensure that on the occasion of this special jubilee, this anniversary, that we do justice to Barbara Prammer, who has also stood for democratic and feminist policies, and we're very pleased that so many people have come here to the Parliament. There are two halls where this event is being held, even though we're only connected to them via a live stream. So I would like to thank all those hundreds of people who are following this on their laptops or cell phone screens. We really appreciate this. This is a hall that is chock full. There's a second room that is chock full. So there's a lot of guests of honor here with us, and I would like to ask you to welcome them. First and foremost, the Federal Party Chairman of the SPÖ, Andreas Babler. It's great to have you here. It is always an honor when she's here, and it's a pleasure to see her, the Vice President of the European Parliament, Evelyn Regner. It's great that she managed to join us. In a dual capacity as the President of the Karl-Renner-Institut and as the second President of the National Council, thank you for allowing us to be here. This is your round of applause. The chairwoman of the parliamentary group in the Federal Council and Austrian Trade Union Federation, Vice President, and Austrian Trade Union Federation's Women's Chairman, Women's Committee Chairman, Corinna Schumann. On behalf of the other organizers, I would also like to ask for a big round of applause for Eva Maria Holzleitner. Thank you. thank you for making it possible for the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium to be organized a 10th time. We're also very grateful to the FEBS Secretary General, Laszlo Andor. It's great to have you with us. Thank you. And next to him, the director of the Karl-Renner-Institut. Thank you for being here. It is great that the two federal managing directors are with us, Klaus Seltenheim and Sandra Breiteneder. Thank you for being here. And I would also like to welcome all the members of the National Council, the Federal Council, all the representatives of the regional parliaments, communities, and also the state women's leaders of the SPÖ organizations who are here with us today. It is a great pleasure that there's such a strong backing from our society and from the political level. So it is great to have all of you here today. This year we have two excellent keynote speakers who are going to give a contribution on the occasion of the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium. They will take us along on the journey to the insights of their research, especially in this year where democracy is on the test bench. Well, I'd like to ask for a big round of applause for Linda Erker and Ayşe Dursun. Thank you for being here. And those among you for whom it is not the first time that they attend the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium, you know that after this morning session we'll do actual work in the workshops, so there's a lot of content that is being provided by the experts. So these workshops, once again, will be held by commentators, moderators, and experts, and in lieu of all the high-ranking representatives of these workshops, I would like to welcome Gabriele Heinisch-Hossek, who initiated the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium. Andrea Brunner will be joining us this evening, and Barbara Rosenberg, of course, also one of the founders. So it is always wonderful to welcome family members when we commemorate Barbara Prammer. Cordial welcome to the two sisters of Barbara Prammer, Elisabeth and Sylvia Thaller. So it is great to have you here. And I would like to thank you for having shared her with us. I'm very pleased to welcome two well-known faces here. A long-standing office manager of Barbara Prammer, Helfried Kahl. It's great to have you here. And former managing director of the Upper Austrian SPÖ Women's Committee, and very close to Barbara, Anneliese Zimmermann. There you are. Dear Anneliese, it's great that you've made it. I would like to also briefly keep you with a few organizational comments. The entire event will be recorded. We have to tell you that, and we hope that this is okay for you, to make sure that everything that is being shared with you, all the political speeches that are held here, can be documented. For all those who are here, there will also be a book stand that I would like to, a book desk that I would like to refer to, and as I mentioned, in the following, we are going to meet all of those who are here in the Parliament during the lunch break, and then we'll meet in the workshops, and there will be a reception in the evening. I would like to close by thanking also the interpreters, also the sign language interpreters. We have German and English interpreters, so there will be a shorter panel here on the stage where I'm going to talk to a guest in English. So if you'd rather use a headset, don't hesitate. We have plenty of headsets Not too many microphones, no, but you can get headsets. Right. I will give you my microphone if that makes you happy too. Now, I would like to hand my microphone to somebody who's going to join us here, the Federal Party chairman of the SPÖ, side by side with the women's organization, Andreas Babler. Thank you very much for the kind welcome, dear comrades, dear activists. It is great that you're here. It is great that a couple of men are also here exceptionally, so welcome you cordially. This is a day of reflection and remembrance of Barbara-Prammer, embedded in the current political situation, also embedded in a future vision and also future promise of social democracy. We had fought for women's rights in this country, and now we are the organization and party that defends women's rights. And we are the organization which will in future want to expand, strengthen and secure women's rights, dear comrades. The historical dimension is also interesting because we've seen how quickly these various regulations that we fought for a long time are now questioned. So there's this image of women who are not allowed to decide whether they want to be pregnant or not. And we have seen this in another federal state. We know that this spirit is still slumbering in other political parties who are sometimes very apt at hiding this. But social democracy is the only political force that actually is countering this. The right for women to choose about their body is key, one of the fundamental rights, and a struggle that Barbara-Prammer has also waged many years ago to ensure that, well, we are not going back to the old ways, and this must never happen again, that these rights that we fought for many years are suddenly put at risk or endangered. We have always seen the fight for women's rights as a fight for democratic rights. This is something that Barbara-Prammer said time and again. This is what she told us. There's no isolated fight for women or the right of self-determination of women. It's about understanding democracy the right way. There is no democracy that we can be happy with if women's rights are not granted, extended and secured, dear comrades. If we are seeing the really sad state of affairs of the current government, we see what it means to prevent violence against women, what the capacities are to protect women against violence, this day-to-day struggle with the Minister of Women's Affairs who is idle. And often we get the impression that she doesn't even want to be called Minister of Women's Affairs. She doesn't even want to be confronted with having to take responsibility for women. 29 femicides in 1 year alone and 50 attempted murders of partners or former partners. Just to give you those dramatic figures. This is an obligation to do everything we can every day in order to protect women. That is our mandate, and this is the promise that we have given as a social democratic movement if we talk about what we want to build up in this democracy. We believe that there can be no good republic where women don't play an important role in every political movement. Politics will also be important when it comes to the question to what extent women can empower themselves to create the boundary conditions to change the circumstances, because often women cannot really empower themselves or enforce their rights. That pervades all strata of our society and of the economy, and also the image of women. If we don't question this image of women and these roles that are ascribed to women, Evie and myself have tackled this image in people's minds. If we can't really disrupt this, it will become difficult to come up with a different understanding, because this is a really important struggle. The role defines positions, and without really changing these role models, we will be weakened. This is why we need to do everything we can and embed this in all our discussions: fair pensions, shorter working hours, and these, well, 70, 80 or 90% of the care work is done by women. They are forced to work part-time, not because they want to work less, but because in reality they earn 17, 18% less. And this is why our demands put forward equal pay for equal work. This needs to be done and implemented finally, after all. One of the main demands of the social democratic organization in this country is that we need to move ahead in terms of that. It's important to disrupt these preconceived role models. We need more transparency in terms of wages to create the prerequisites for women to not automatically be the ones who have to work part-time and look after children. This is often a reality. And at the same time, we need to wage this struggle. When we're talking about women's rights, democratic rights, and securing democracy, well, the next taboo is broken. The extreme right-wing parties have prepared this in their ready-made ideologies. But what we're seeing now is not just hatred of foreigners, xenophobia. It's not only playing people off against each other, the traditional derogatory attitudes of men versus women, with a bonus being paid for women if they stay at home. It's about democratic fundamental rights that are at risk. All those who don't have the same opinion, they are threatened not only to be expelled, but to actually be persecuted. Now, this links up with Barbara-Prammer's ideas. It was her who created this democracy workshop with a strong focus on this being a political project. We need an enlightened, well-educated society that recognizes the patterns between these radical ideologies. This is why it is so important to say today how grateful we can be that young people come here, they get access to democracy, education, and many other things. And I would like to thank Barbara-Prammer for her initiatives. What we have available for an enlightened society and to counter these authoritarian fantasies are well-educated, also democratically educated young people for the future of our country. And this is why I would like to wish you a really strong day, a good day, a day where you share your passion with each other, where you're fully motivated and you leave from here knowing full well that social democracy stands side by side and is firmly embedded in the fight for women's rights. I wish you a wonderful day. I should already be in Styria now, where Comrade has is waiting for me to organize a tour with her there. And as a token of appreciation, I have managed to briefly join you here. So I have a nice, wonderful day of fighting for women's rights, characterized by solidarity. I wish you interesting presentations. I'd like to thank everybody who organized the event. It's a wonderful event. Thank you very much. Friendship. A big thank you to Andreas Babler. This round of applause will carry him to Styria, where he's going to visit several plants and companies, and I'm sure he's also going to make a few statements on what's happening at the political level in this federal state. On our agenda, we still have the feminist struggle for more participation in democracy, and also the contribution that feminism and democracy can make together for a successful society. Now, I would like to ask our second president of the National Council, Doris Bures, to join us on the stage for her traditional welcome address. Dear Eva Maria Holzleitner, as the chairwoman of the Women's Committee of the SPÖ at the federal level, and we really appreciate the fact that the congregation of the European Progressive Parties and their educational organization, the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, is here. So there are rumors about some representatives of the diplomatic corps who are also rumored to be here. So I'd like to welcome everybody who comes here representing international organizations or coming from other countries or embassies. So we also have an ambassador, Excellency, the ambassador from Spain, so it is great to have you here. Apologies, I didn't have you on my list, but it is a great pleasure to have you here. So thank you, Excellency, that you've taken the time to join us. And now I'd like to welcome the Secretary General of the European organization that is closely linked with the Karl-Renner-Institut here, Laszlo. This was a long moderation, Laszlo Andor from the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. And Eva, I'd like to give you the microphone and then you can maybe pass it on. In an interview on this exceptional year, and of course everybody here in the room knows that this is a year where there will be a lot of elections. You talked about the year of democracy, so it is of course normal that this feminist kickoff is under this motto. But what exactly do you mean by that? What does this mean for your own political work? Well, the year of democracy 2024, well, I came up with this motto because this year a lot of people will be voting around the world more than ever before, not only in Austria and in Europe, but in many other countries as well. And this year of democracy is so extremely important for women because these are important decisions that set the course, especially in terms of policies for women, and how policies should be designed for women. In Austria, when it comes to democratic rights being strengthened during the National Council elections, if after the National Council elections we will be in a situation where women's achievements will have to be defended, or whether we can move forward and engage in progressive women's policies, the 50-50, halbe halbe, as we called it in the 90s. So paid and unpaid work is fairly distributed between the two sexes. So can we manage to move forward in favor of women in a progressive future to a more democratic future, or will women's policies achievements have to be defended? And I think looking around Europe, in many countries this is already the case. They need to defend their achievements. And in Hungary, for example, especially in family policies, the people are taking a step back, and women have to, well, can no longer participate in gainful employment on an equal basis. In Poland, for example, there's a turnaround after the elections, but the former government party, PiS, does not accept this democratic decision of the vote. And for women, the situation is extremely difficult because we know that in Poland, abortions, well, have led to women dying. So we have a lot of work to do here in Europe, and the year of democracy needs to be going forward, progressive steps forward, equal rights, and further progress needs to be achieved in terms of wage transparency and many other things. So this year of democracy for women is a central issue. Thank you. Doris, the connection between democracy and feminism is quite obvious. At the same time, we have to say that there's also democracies that fulfill the rules of democracy, but they're still quite far from being feminist. This context of democracy and feminism has not only marked the life of Barbara-Prammer, but undoubtedly also you played a very important role, especially here as the second president of the National Council. So what does democracy mean without feminism? Well, thank you for this very comprehensive question you're asking me, even though one might say it's easy to answer, right? There is no democracy without feminism. And in these hard struggles for equal rights, equality, and a strong feminist movement, well, sometimes you get the impression that you run out of breath. But anyway, we have to say that this gives me so much hope, confidence, and pleasure to be able to experience such an event as the one here. This is a chock-full room here. There's another room that is also full. So they might as well buckle up because we are here to stay. I would like to briefly shed some light on the connection between the two, just to exemplify and illustrate this. Why is there such a strong interrelation between democracy and feminism? Especially where women's rights are under pressure. You can see how close this interrelation is. Globally, as Eva said, there is a development where the democratically organized societies are not getting more in number, but less. There are fewer of them. 1 out of 4 citizens on this planet live in a dictatorship. And based on our understanding of a liberal and highly developed democracy, it is less than 15% of the global population who are living in highly developed democracies. So we need to defend what we have achieved in terms of liberal democracy. And we need to be watchful when there are developments that are directed against women's rights and thus against democratic systems. Let me give you 2 examples. One international example where you see the terrible developments in Iran and Afghanistan. Well, this is where it started. Women were excluded from education and from gainful employment. The most fundamental women's rights are trampled on. And this goes hand in glove with anti-democratic developments. Let's take a look around Europe. We are discussing this frequently in our women's organizations and movements. Let's take Poland or Hungary, where the right of self-determination of women about their own body is questioned. There are questions of abortion. Well, there are debates like in the times before Johanna Donau, to put it this way. And that is the beginning of anti-democratic movements. And this is why, dear women, it is so important for us to be here and to show this connection between women's rights and democracy, between freedom, liberty, solidarity, human dignity, and this feeling of community and belonging. And a day like this can make a good contribution to this goal. Thank you very much, Doris Bures. And the international level is, of course, one thing.
question, what is the contribution of the progressive parties within the European Union towards democracy, towards feminism, towards all these issues that were already addressed by President Bures and by Eva Maria Holzleitner, such as member states of the European Union as Hungary and Poland. But what is the contribution to a democratic and feministic European Union, especially now in this year where we also will have elections to and for the European Parliament?
Thanks for allowing me to speak in English. I think indeed this year is special for Europe because of the election of the European Parliament in June, and the outcome will depend on mobilization. And I think what we have seen in the last cycle, which is now coming to close, that a lot of progress is possible for gender equality if we elect people, political forces, which represent these goals and can deliver when they are elected in high office. As you know, this was also the first cycle when the European Commission itself was led by a female politician. And the result of that was also that in the staff, among the public officials of the European Union, now there are much more women in leading positions than in the previous cycles. But this is not only token politics, which we speak about when it comes to the European Union. The EU in this cycle promoted pay equality between men and women through transparency, and this work obviously will have to continue. A long cycle of legislation on gender equality on corporate boards also reached a conclusion in this period, and Council recommendations were adopted, for example, to promote childcare and long-term care, which also helps women to reconcile better a private life and also professional careers. So these are also the achievements of the Socialist Commissioner Helena Dalli, who was filling a position which was first time established in the European Commission to have someone who is just designated to be responsible for equality. And I personally believe that with the progressive Commission President, which could be Nicola Schmidt, there would be a better guarantee that such positions and such achievements are preserved also for the next cycle. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Laszlo. Of course, it can make a difference if a woman is the chef of the commission, but we prefer a progressive woman. But how? Just a small answer maybe on that second question. How important would you say is also the alliance between progressive politicians and, let's say, the labor unions? Because especially when we're talking about equal payment, unpaid care work, would you say this is an alliance, this is really important to strengthen and progressive Europe?
Oh, yes, this is absolutely important. And I think it's statistically also proven that the higher share a labor market has with collective bargaining, that the unions can negotiate wages, the smaller the gender pay gap is. So this is very important, and that's why this famous EU directive on the minimum wage actually primarily promotes the collective bargaining, which in the European Union is an important issue because of the East-West gap. Colleagues have already referred to cases of Hungary and Poland, but one of the notorious phenomena in this country is there's a very weak position of the trade unions, very low coverage of the collective bargaining, which would need to be promoted in this period. And I think gender equality could also improve in the labor market, in the workplaces, and in the leading positions as well.
Thank you very much, Laszlo Andor. Liebe Eva.
Dear Eva Maria Holzleitner, this is the round where we've seen which allies we have for progressive, feminist, democratic policies. This is undoubtedly also civil society. Also, society as such. Helga Konrad has already said that halbe, this 50-50, so an equal distribution of work. So she had the balls, if I may say so, to pronounce what we are all seeing every day, namely that this half and half doesn't work, this 50-50 doesn't work out. So maybe we could fill this slogan once again with life and say we're not going to give up on that. How important is this alliance with civil society and also the individual members of our society and the individual families and friends? Well, of course, this is a central topic because parties have political demands and content, but as somebody who's fighting on their own, it is much more difficult to find a broad-based alliance when it comes to such demands. This is why networking, getting together and working beyond one's own borders is key. One positive example had been this alliance of social partners. So the women are important, especially because it has been Renate Anderl from the Chamber of Labour, together with vice presidents such as Carina Schumann, but also the allies of the Chamber of Economic Affairs, the Chamber of Labour, and the Chamber of Agriculture. So we created a broad-based alliance because we need a fundamental thrust in elementary schools. So this is really important and quite independent from political attitudes and mindsets. We said we want to work together in order to promote this topic. And I think this is one very positive example because, in fact, there's hardly any party that considers that child education and childcare is not an important issue. So this is a positive example of how these alliances can be forged. And these alliances are also needed, especially in 2024 and beyond. What I liked was an event that was organized at the end of last year on the subject of feminist foreign policy, also organized by Doris Bures, our President of the National Council. And it turned out that if women are involved in peace negotiations on an equal footing, then the likeliness of sustainable peace becomes bigger. Women make a difference. And this difference, if they are allowed to participate in all areas on an equal footing, well, we need to pursue this in order to make sure that women are also at the negotiating table, as they deserve. Thank you, Eva Maria Holzleitner. Women make a difference. These alliances, independent of the fact that the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium has, from the very beginning, been launched by the SPÖ group in Parliament and the FEBS, but it's always been a non-partisan place of networking when it comes to protecting women against violence and science and research. So this is supposed to be an alliance that can be used in order to derive a lot of valuable insights. This takes me to the question of how can feminist goals best be achieved, and in particular in a year where almost half of the global population is eligible for voting. And of course, most of those people will be women. So what does it take in order to achieve feminist goals? Well, it takes all of you, right? It takes us and events such as this one. Struggle, fighting, passion. This is what is needed in order to take as many people as possible on this journey, win them over. I have to tell you that Evie has told you what it takes for women's rights to prevail. We need to be able to defend ourselves against any attacks. We need lots of women. They need to be there. They need to be at the table. They need to be able to have a say. And looking around the room, there's such a big diversity. You talked about the different political approaches, but of course there's also different biographies, different experiences that enrich us. It is the young women, it is the ones with experience, also older women who have different experiences. And if we can manage to show solidarity, to stand together and to pursue this with a lot of passion and commitment in order to continue this dialogue and put forward our demands, then in spite of all the negative developments that you may see out there, this gives me hope. And this really gives me optimism. There's so many women who've always fought for women's quotas, and I've always done that myself. Because I'm convinced that we need a critical mass in order to change something. Of course, one woman may be very outspoken and stamping on the ground. This is not going to be enough, but we need a lot of voices, and we also need people at the helm, at the top, who are role models, who are capable of creating enthusiasm among other women. And this is why, dear Eva Maria, I would like to tell you that you are one of those women. You are doing just that. This is something that I like very much. Just like your predecessors, you are keeping up the tradition of women's organizations, even the pioneers of women's organizations. It's not only saying everything in the past was bad and now we're great. No, we're proud of standing on the shoulders of giantesses, wonderful women who really achieved a whole lot in this country. And this is something that is also part of the success of women's organizations, and that is also part of a successful, proud, social, democratic women's movement. So I like this very much, and this is our recipe of sorts. We are here, we are discussing, we show solidarity, we respect each other, and I believe that all this praise that Eva Maria highly deserves. And of course, I'm not one to flatter people. I would rather tell people in a straightforward way what I think. And I believe that in politics it is important not to treat people with anything but respect and at eye level. But since the two sisters of Barbara are also here, I think I've known Barbara-Prammer quite well, and it is not a coincidence that we are devoting a political event to her. It's not only about handing over flowers. No, we are dealing with the ideas that moved you throughout your lives, dear Barbara-Prammer. And as somebody from Upper Austria, I think Barbara-Prammer would be proud of you, dear Eva Maria. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our feminist president of the National Council, dear Eva Maria Holzleitner. Thank you, Laszlo.
Laszlo, not only for contributing, but also for assisting in planning this forum and also making it possible. We appreciate that highly. Wir freuen uns jetzt.
Now we are very happy with a little delay, for which I apologize, but this is a very special anniversary. It's the 10th anniversary of the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium. And it's the first one that is held in Parliament, in the Austrian Parliament, in two halls that are packed to the rafters, which of course requires a lot of organizational and technical effort. I think we've done a good job, and we're very happy that you are connected to us via live stream. We are going to continue with two keynote speeches. First of all, we are going to hear a keynote by Linda Erker. She is a historian at the Institute of Contemporary History in Vienna, where she's also doing research. She will talk about the topic of history that is made about the agency and achievements of women in the interwar period based on the example of the University of Vienna. We are very happy that you are here. The floor is yours, and I'm going to provide you with a fresh glass of water. Professor Erker, you have the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends, so I will take a little sashay into history. 532 years ago, so more than 500,000 ago, in 1897, the Faculty of Philosophy was founded officially as the first subunit of the University of Vienna, which was founded in 1365. As you all know, at the end of the 19th century, the first women's movement in Austria not only in inverted commas, pushed for political participation rights, the right to vote, and a reform of marriage and family law, but also for improved educational opportunities, both in general secondary schools and universities. And Austria, by international standards, was late to the game, later than Switzerland or the German Reich. And I would like to talk about the history of the access to women. During the First Republic and Austro-Fascism, I would like to tell you a story of continuous struggle, long-term achievements, but also of short-term defeats. I'm doing this in order to make the historical agency, the possibilities for action, and especially the success of women in the interwar period visible. It should become clear in this process how important staying power is and how important it is to explore some achievements in retrospect, because sometimes only then we can see their importance. But let's start again with what happened 127 years ago, in 1897, that is. After intense efforts, and it is always very, very important to mention that by the Vienna Association for Extended Women's Education and others, young women finally received the important addition in their school leaving certificates ready to attend the university. So 3 female students then took their first permitted steps as university students at the University of Vienna. The ratio of female to male students at the time was 1 to 183. An insertion today, depending on a discipline, so we can generally speak of equality. The exceptions at the top and at the bottom, I think you're all familiar with it. Currently, women make up almost 2/3 of both graduates and students in general, but the proportion of women in the STEM fields is 30%, and there is also an imbalance in professorships and also among deans and rectors. Back to history. In the same year, in 1897, Gabriele Posanna von Ehrenthal was the first woman to receive a doctorate in medicine from the University of Vienna, having previously completed her medical studies in Switzerland and tried everything up to a petition to the emperor to have her degree nostrified and open a medical practice in Austria. This was followed in 1900 by the opening of the Faculty of Medicine. At this time, in 1905, the Romance philologist Elise Richter, who gave her name to our current event room, was the first woman to qualify as a professor at the University of Vienna to obtain her teaching license. Richter's research was mainly in the field of linguistics, with a focus on phonetics and phonology. Richter's inaugural lecture, the first by a woman in the German-speaking world, was accompanied by counter-demonstrations by clerical and nationalist students. The protest was not only against the appointment of a woman as an unpaid private lecturer at the University of Vienna, but also against Elise Richter as a woman of Jewish origin. However, it must be made clear here, Richter had not been a member of the Jewish community since 1897 and was baptized in 1911, so it was not about her. Elise Richter also stood up for her female colleagues. In 1922, she founded the Association of Austrian Women in Academia, which it chaired until 1930. Under National Socialism, she was persecuted for racist reasons and was dismissed from her position. In 1943, she died in the Terezin concentration camp after the National Socialists deported her there together with her sister Helene Richter. So much for Elise Richter. But let's go back in history. Shortly after the First World War, further barriers to access to university were removed. Women were gradually admitted to technical and veterinary fields of studies, but also to the University of Natural Resources with the introduction of constitutional studies in 1919. Women were finally given access to doctoral studies at law faculties in 1918-19, the year in which women were granted universal suffrage in the newly proclaimed Republic of Austria, with the exception of sex workers. So the ban on women gaining a doctorate at a faculty law was lifted. This was very significant as the degree not only enabled access to the legal professions, but was also a prerequisite for almost all higher state civil servant positions. Somewhat later, the Faculty of Protestant Theology allowed women to enter in 1928 for the sake of completeness. Also, the Faculty of Catholic Theology did not admit women until 1945-46. In the years after the First World War, some women did make a scientific career. However, it took almost 60 years before a woman, the physicist Berta Karlik, was awarded a full professorship for the first time in 1956. Now the question remains as to why it took so long for women to achieve a paid professorship in Austria. Well, the fact that it took so long in Austria was partly to do with the fact that the university was still an institution dominated by conservative-minded men for much of the 20th century, and from 1920, Austria had a Christian social government and a Catholic conservative dominated Ministry of Education, with the exception of the Nazi dictatorship, and those responsible in the ministry were very, very critical, and they made the final decisions on both admissions and appointments. And those responsible in the ministry were not interested in emancipation, and they were as critical as the professors who prepared all personnel decisions and to whom the ministry normally adhered. So we've come quite far in the First Republic. So the first generation of women at universities was regarded as an exception. The university space had been conquered by them, or to put it more truthfully, they had got a foot in the door. In the Vienna of populist mayor Karl Lueger, universities tended to be liberal and progressive after 1918. It was the other way around. The city was red, the university black-brown. This meant that the space behind this door, the University of Vienna, was dominated by anti-democrats, anti-leftists, anti-Semites, and Androcentrists. Women such as Berta Karlik, she began her studies in 1923, Maria Hoda, she began her studies in 1926, or Hertha Firmberg, she began her studies in 1928, to name just three very successful former female students. They were part of the second generation, and they very clearly did not walk into a ready-made position, quite on the contrary. So the university in the 1920s and the 1930s was a terrain fraught by tension. Physical and psychological violence were not the exception, and many women were confronted with discrimination, mostly even as Jews and or leftists, with intersectional discrimination. You have to imagine it like this. Within Red Vienna, there was, a bit like a political elitist enclave, the Black Vienna, as it was also called, in which Catholic conservative German nationalist and later National Socialist professors, all men, especially from the humanities, joined forces and pursued university politics in more or less secret networks. These networks were called Bears Dens, or the Kartellverband CV. They succeeded in the First Republic to have a decisive influence on the question of who could habilitate or obtain a professorship. They were the gatekeepers at the time. Odd, as they categorized Jews and left-wingers, were successfully prevented from the mid-1920s at the latest, and so these gatekeepers continued to reproduce in their cliques via teacher-student relationships and political camp loyalties at Austria's largest university. For these all-male networks, women naturally also belonged to the odd ones out. However, they were usually not even worth mentioning because they didn't stand a chance anyway. And these all-male support structures, as we call them today, continued to have an effect beyond the caesura of 1938 and 1945, but that's another story. Against this backdrop, it must be clearly stated that being of Jewish origin, a social democrat or a foreigner at the University of Vienna brought considerable disadvantages in the interwar period, but despite fierce resistance from the student body and the professors, academics, who were discriminated against as Jews and or leftists on the basis of their supposed affiliation, still managed to become full professors or even deans in a few exceptional cases. I'm only talking about scientists, but not about female scientists. At Austria's universities in the 1920s and 1930s, the only spheres open to women were administration or selected academic support positions, such as librarians, laboratory assistants, and only occasionally as private lecturers without pay. At that time, women's academic freedom was very limited, but they persistently pushed them to the limit based on Gabriela Hauch's book, Frauen bewegen Politik, Women Move Politics. In our case, we can say in a modified form, women move universities. However, they initially did this without effective networking and above all, without directly visible success for the collective of women. While around a third of the administrative staff were women, 4%, well, the proportion of academic staff was only 4%, and this did not change under Austro-fascism. As some of you may know, the Austrian Parliament and the main building of the University of Vienna were both located on the Ringstraße Boulevard of November 12th from 1919 to 1934, but also the members of the university struggled with democracy and the idea of an independent Austria. With the elimination of parliament in March 1933, not much changed in some aspects. The first dictatorship in Austria only made it even clearer where the God-given place of women at university should be, and a policy of repression ensued. Whether in girls' education or in women's studies, there is no doubt that the Austro-fascist idea of a quasi-natural and God-given gender order had an impact on women's entire everyday lives, both professionally and privately. The situation worsened from 1934 as women's political achievements of the First Republic were successively reversed, and the re-Catholicization of society was accompanied by remasculinization. This is reflected in Article 16 of the Constitution published in 1934, which stated that women had the same rights and duties as men, unless otherwise stipulated by another law. We can summarize as follows. Women were, in the end, among the big losers of Austro-fascism, becoming second-class citizens and reduced to the role of mother and housewife. The following can be observed with a focus on universities. Female students played no role in the Austro-fascist conception of the new student elite. This can be seen, for example, in the fact that the paramilitary university camps enforced by the regime, which were about training the future elite of the regime, were only set up for male students. An alternative community and identity-building patriotic event for women was not implemented. If we look at the female employees at universities, we can see that under Austro-fascism, the so-called double breadwinner regulation was intended to drive women out of the world of work. This regulation was one of the most important tools of Austro-fascist gender policy. Specifically, the measure meant that women in the federal civil service were banned from employment or dismissed if they were married to a man who also worked in the civil service and had an income of more than 340 shillings. We're talking about 1,400 euros in today's purchasing power. This was an intervention that was officially justified by the high employment figures, almost 25% in 1934, and presented to the outside world as a job creation measure for men. The fact is that the ordinance was an ideological statement against independent women who took the liberty of combining work and marriage just like men, as historian Irene Bandhauer-Schöffmann explains. In the field of education, female teachers in schools were the most affected by the new regulation. Women made up just the majority here. Women have not yet made it that far as professors at university, but unlike today, at the end of 1933, there was not a single woman among the 217 paid full and associate professors on staff. Of the 780 academic staff, only 32 were women. Only in the administrative positions was the ratio somewhat more balanced, with one woman for every 2 men. But even here, the regime tried to intervene to the detriment of women who found themselves in a dilemma as university employees. Both concubinage and marriage to a man in the civil service were equally grounds for dismissal. After celibacy for female civil servants had only been completely abolished in 1920, married women were once again barred from employment in the public sector from 1933. Initially, this did not leave any notable traces. The number of the aforementioned 32 female academic staff remained the same. It should be emphasized once again that there was not a single female full associate or even emerita professor on the staff of the University of Vienna. So we could say, if we were cynics, that no damage could be done because the reactionary image of women held by the hegemonic right-wing and Catholic members of the university and the anti-feminist university policy in the interwar period, even in the years before 1933, placed narrow limits on women's academic careers soon after their dissertation. And this repression was very, very strong, and those cases in which women did manage to work successfully as academics for a short time were an exception, and at the same time make it clear how externally determined women's spheres of activities were. Academic careers were mainly possible in the non-university sector and usually under precarious conditions. And I would like to cite the social psychologist Marie Jahoda. She's a good example to give this repression a face. Despite the conditions described above, she developed into an early pioneer of social research. Jahoda completed her doctorate in 1932 at the age of just 25. In 1932, she was also part of a team at the Non-University Association, the Economic Psychology Research Center, where she conducted an outstanding study on the effects of unemployment. Jahoda's life was not only characterized by her research, but also by a strong politicization due to her illegal political work. The Austro-fascists arrested Jahoda at the end of 1936, and she was released in 1937 after international protests. But also Hertha Firnberg, whose biography was recently published by historian Maria Wirth, was also one of those women who, as part of the second generation, made it to a doctorate despite a hostile climate. She initially changed her studies after 2 semesters. As Maria Wirth writes, the reasons for this was that a professor had announced that, as a matter of principle, no women would be allowed to pass exams, or that she had actually failed once, which had spoiled her desire. But In 1936, Firnberg completed her doctorate in history with the words, "That was not possible." Maria Wirth quotes Hertha Firnberg's conclusion in the mid-1930s that she never pursued her career aspiration of becoming a university lecturer. What was the situation at the time for women who were already one step ahead of Jahoda and Firnberg? One woman, Marianne Thalmann, was the only woman among the lecturers listed in the rectorate reports who accepted an appointment in a non-German speaking country. She had habilitated at the University of Vienna in 1924 and was awarded the title of associate professor as a private lecturer in modern German literary history in 1933, but she didn't get a post. Thalmann moved to the US in 1933. The historian Edith Prost suggests that Thalmann saw no professional future at the institute, which was characterized by a male phalanx, precisely because of the limited opportunities in Austria. Thalmann's example shows that in the 1920s, 1930s, society did not allow women to play a serious role at universities, otherwise the proportion of women at the University of Vienna would have been higher. This did not change under Austro-fascism, but still 3 women managed to obtain the title of private lecturer during this time and to remain at the university. For the time being, at the Faculty of Medicine, Carla Zawischl-Ossenitz acquired the teaching qualification for histology in 1934. At the Faculty of Philosophy, Elise Hoffmann qualified as a lecturer in paleobotany in 1935, and Berta Kali qualified as a lecturer in physics in 1937. Under Austro-fascism, apart from Hoffmann, Karlik, and Zawischl-Ossenitz, only 10 other women were part of the university as habilitated scientists. Among them, Charlotte Bühler, Elise Richter, Erna Patzelt, and Marianne Thalmann. Elise Richter, like many of the other academics mentioned, such as Carla Zawischl-Ossenitz, had a distinctly Catholic and an attitude which was loyal to the regime. The latter must have encountered a number of obstacles from her national professors when she was successfully habilitated in 1934. Erna Patzelt, Austria's first habilitated historian, was one of the few women to give a lecture at the German club in spring 1934 entitled Judaism in the Early Middle Ages. And there was a stereotype, and she was accused of the fact that her partner who had written her academic works. But not only left-wing women, but also German nationalist women at the university had to fight with a lot of headwind. I would like to come to an initial conclusion. Despite all these adverse circumstances, today we can remember and celebrate the female students of the interwar period, such as Karlik, Jahoda, and Firnberg, as important players in the conquest of the university space. And I think we should also celebrate them. Despite the generational community, these 3 women ultimately had very different lives. Marie Jahoda was forced to emigrate to England in 1937, where she was able to continue working in social research. She lived in the US until 1958. In 1958, she returned to England and taught at Brunel University and the University of Sussex until her retirement in 1973. Hertha Firnberg was unable to realize her desire for a career as a social researcher. After leaving university, she worked as a business journalist, gave private tuition, and gave lectures on social and economic history topics in popular education. During the Nazi regime, Firnberg worked in a fashion publishing house and learned bookkeeping and business management. After 1945, she worked in the Lower Austrian Chamber of Labor, was a member of the Federal Council of the SPÖ, and became the first federal minister for science and research in 1970, and remained so for 13 years. In this role, she campaigned for the democratization of universities, but this did not immediately have an impact on the representation of women in this area. Berta Karlik was actually able to continue working at the University of Vienna after her habilitation. Her career continued to go well, even under National Socialism. After the war, she became president of the Association of Women in Academia. She headed the Institute for Radium Research at the Austrian Academy of Sciences and became the first woman in Austria to be appointed full professor at the University of Vienna in 1956. Numerous honors followed, and it was not until 1973 that the Academy of Sciences elected Berta Karlik as the first woman to become a full member. Jahoda, Firnberg, and Karlik, these three women, really had extraordinary careers for themselves. In retrospect, this is evident, and it seems as if it would have been a matter of course, but that was not the case. It was anything but certain that such a future was possible for women of their generation of students. Hardly any of her former fellow female students had achieved what she had achieved. But what they all had in common, including those with less professional success, is as obvious today as it was unforeseeable at the time. Quite directly, the second generation of female students had to contend with powerful anti-feminists, but in the long term, their path to higher education really opened the door to all subsequent generations.
Das nun wollten.
Whether the anti-feminists wanted it or not, and as you can see, history is being made. The academic efforts of all those women in the interwar period meant unstoppable progress, even if it perhaps unfortunately didn't feel like it at the time. If I had another 30 minutes here today, I would now focus on the years after 1945 and talk about the long shadow of the interwar period, the dominance of the Kartellverband. But instead of talking about further male networks and stumbling blocks, I would like to end with an abbreviated quote from Jenny Grünblatt from 1896. And this brings me back to the beginning of my talk. Perhaps the quote will provide us with some fodder for thought for the ensuing workshops and for the year 2024, which has just begun. I'm not discussing the question of whether we deserve emancipation. It is settled for the majority of pro-emancipation women and men. All emancipation debates culminate in the complaint that we are not equal, and in the dispute as to whether we are authorized to demand an equal right, we harm ourselves. We do not need to establish grounds for a clear right. Otherwise, the right becomes a matter of dispute. One of women's main virtues, modesty, is the Achilles heel of the women's issue. We must not complain, we must not argue, we must demand and conquer what is not given to us slowly, step by step, but inexorably. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Linda Erker. Thank you also for this wonderful historical context that you provided us with, and also the background that undoubtedly who has been a very important political leader and personality. And thank you for embedding it into what authoritarian and fascist systems can do to women in the context of access and representation in education, science, and research. So I believe that this takes us back to what also has been said at the political level, namely that when feminism and democracy are to go hand in glove, then this is only possible by having equal access to education, equal access to societal participation. And this needs to be renegotiated every day. Now, from the historical perspective, we will now move on to a political science perspective. The second keynote speaker, University Assistant Professor Dr. Ayşe Dursun, she did and is still doing research at the Institute of Political Science at the University of Vienna on feminist theory, equality, policies, intersectionality, social reproduction and care, women's movements and migration. Her keynote has the title Women's Solidarity 2024, Democracy Policy Considerations. Ayşe Dursun, the floor is yours. Dear guests, dear colleagues, a cordial welcome to today's Barbara-Prammer-Symposium. It is a great pleasure to be able to give a keynote presentation here. The presentation deals with the burning issues of gender equality and current attacks against women and their vision of an equal and emancipated society. And by way of conclusion, I would like to talk about the feminist understanding of democracy as a caring practice and women's solidarity as a possible way out of this dilemma. This presentation will be started with a simple observation or maybe some insights. In 2024, this has not lost in validity or political relevance. We are living in a patriarchy. What this means in concrete terms that the specific societal order we are living in is putting women at a structural disadvantage. This affects, for example, housework, childcare, and also looking after elderly family members. All these long-term care tasks are assumed by women. And also in the labor market, where women work primarily in low-paid jobs. And women are often underrepresented in various spheres of life. These examples point towards a characteristic and structural fact of patriarchal societies, such as ours, namely a gender-specific division of labor. The spatial and symbolic differentiation between the private and the public sphere is still a frame of reference to determine what tasks should be accomplished by which gender. Reproduction work, so reproductive work, that is to say, preserving human life on this planet, cooking, washing, looking after old, young, and people with disability. This is clearly assigned to the privacy, the private sphere of household and family, where it is normally handled as unpaid work by mothers, spouses, and daughters. Moving reproductive work into family as a patriarchal structural feature can also be found in this country. In the typology of the welfare state, Austria is considered as a conservative welfare state, where reproductive and care work is seen as a private, family-based concern. And the state can come in addition to the family, if needed. So the main care work is done by families and traditionally by women, as the recently published time management study of the Austrian Statistical Office demonstrates. A study from 2017 that was based on a random sample of 1,500 recipients of nursing care allowance. 95% were female and 41% were male. So this doesn't seem to be very gender specific. But there is a gender specific pattern that can be ascertained when we take a look at who is looking after these individuals, who is giving them care. 73% women and 27% men were the caregivers. Most caregivers were children, partners, spouses, and parents. So care work was a family affair. But it is also increasingly delegated to migrant workers that play an important role when it comes to closing these long-term care gaps, especially for long-term care for the elderly. 80% of people in need of care in Austria are cared for by relatives at home. Professional nursing staff alone would be unaffordable for the state. This is what the official website of the federal government states. The aforementioned study also demonstrates that family caregivers are providing round-the-clock nursing care. And if there is a diagnosis of dementia, allowances are paid. 92% of the round-the-clock nurses are female, and 98% of them are migrants, coming primarily from Eastern and Central Europe. And this makes it clear that the patriarchy is delegating the hardest work to the weakest members of society. This gender-specific division of labor is also at the same time class-specific and also race and ethno-specific, remains a main pillar of patriarchy. To overcome this, we need to redistribute reproductive work. This is indispensable. Overcoming the patriarchy. Well, this takes me to my second feminist insight. The patriarchy we're living in is incomplete and imperfect. This is where the roles and responsibilities of the genders are constantly fought over and negotiated. This imperfection and incompleteness of the patriarchy is shown by collective political fights of women. Such an enduring struggle affects feminist attempts to see reproductive work as a tough and valuable but devalued work. And thus, society is produced and can exist. In its critical theory and practice, feminists often show that in capitalism, reproductive work is seen as unproductive work, which supposedly does not create any value added. And they argue against it, but it is only through reproductive work that the most important merchandise in capitalism, namely workers, can be produced. Moving reproductive work into families is seen as a capitalist accumulation strategy based on which the costs for producing workers is dramatically reduced. In the context of missing institutional care infrastructure, this means that women are not participating so much in the labor market, and gainful employment is often interrupted for longer periods of time, which results in a lower income and lower retirement benefits, and as a consequence, they cannot leave any violent partners, and often they're poor in old age. Thanks to their political struggles, women in the past 100 or 50 years have managed to point this out to the general public and to create an impetus to fight against this at the government level by equality policies at the government level in order to address the situation. For an equal participation of women in our society, we need to continue to expand public care infrastructure, especially for childcare is essential. In this area, there is a preliminary societal consensus. If you take a look at the childcare statistics, the 3 to 5-year-olds here in childcare institutions to 95%, and 70% of nursery schools are sponsored by the federal government, the regions, or the communities. The 0 to 2-year age group, well, there's only 30% in childcare facilities, but it remains to be expected that Austria will continue to invest in childcare infrastructure in light of the standards of the EU Council, which provides for a ratio of 45% of childcare facilities until 2030. Like all feminist achievements, the process of care worker is still fought over. This takes me to my third feminist insight. Feminism and its political visions are currently attacked by right-wing populist and anti-feminist players. These attacks go through a discourse and a narrative where feminists and their requirements and demands for equality and emancipation are seen as a danger for society. Thus, feminism leads to effeminate men, to masculine women, and to early sexualization of children. And this means that society will be a chaotic bundle of sexless people. Now, to get out of this gender madness, as they call it, the re-traditionalization of gender roles is suggested, where women are clearly assigned the role of mothers, and institutional childcare is seen as externalization of children. A current example refers to the proposal of FPÖ-Burgenland, the Liberal Party, to have a mother's salary. So that is to pay it out to parents in the Burgenland with Austrian citizenship who look after the children at home until they go to nursery school, which is obligatory. This proposal is so interesting and should be taken seriously because there are several biases and prejudices and systems of oppression such as the patriarchy, racism, and the neoliberal capitalism at the same time. So firstly, this proposal is based on a heteronormative family role model where the husband is in gainful employment, whereas the mother is the caregiver and looks after her family and stays at home. Secondly, there's a consistent racist position reflected by this proposal where only parents with Austrian citizenship are entitled to such allowances. Migrants are clearly excluded, refugees and also people without Austrian citizenship are also excluded. Thirdly, childcare that is to be accomplished by mothers in one's own household, the costs for social reproduction are to be reduced and kept to a minimum, especially in the area of minimum wage. The introduction of such a mother's salary would also have other long-term consequences that are negative for democracy. With this mother's salary, incentives are to be created to ensure that more and more mothers and families look after their children at home. What this could lead to is that since institutional childcare will be used less and less, and thus the working conditions and care conditions will deteriorate. Reduced quality of childcare would mean for many families that they would seek private and individual childcare solutions for their kids. Such a process of rethinking in our population would disrupt the consensus that childcare is a societal task, and the welfare state ideally should provide the necessary infrastructure for childcare. This would be undermined in the long term. Women who are now supposed to look after their children could only partake in societal life at the margins. The dismantling of public childcare is not the only risk that we are seeing. There's another risk which consists in the racist reinterpretation. Let me start with childcare. An increasing societal acceptance is also enjoyed by assimilation approaches, where public childcare is seen as an important integration measure. The focus should be primarily on learning the German language and the early mediation of Austrian values under inverted commas, to children with a migration background. In the past, they were even in favor of a second mandatory year of nursery school. So what's important is in which way the existing policies can be reinterpreted in terms of equality, and with which motivation these are to be spread and extended. There's also neoliberal interpretations of such policies with a potential of equalization. These are highly problematic. In terms of childcare, what we can say is that often this is seen as a government investment into the human capital, which will lead to economic growth and promote competition. This hegemonial interpretation is based on a neoliberal image of man, based on economic considerations, so based on maximization of benefit and profit. Education should turn these beings into self-determined subjects that are looking after their own needs in an autonomous way, without needing the solidarity of its fellow human beings and without relying on the state. Secondly, neoliberal actors also ask for an expansion of public care infrastructure to ensure that women and society are forced into more gainful employment. But what feminists are asking for is that women and people in general should spend less time for thing-making, as a feminist calls it, so making and producing of things, objects and goods, and to have more time for life-making, so to produce and to shape life itself in order to be able to enjoy a good life. Reducing gainful employment is a component of a feminist idea of a caring and emancipated society. One way out of this complex and contradictory bundle of attacks and risks for equality and emancipation are offered by organized collective fights of women. This takes me to my fourth and last insight. Women need to form broad-based alliances and coalitions and show solidarity and have political coexistence in order to ward off and fend off attacks of extreme right-wing populists. A large number of feminist social movement researchers show that women can best form such broad-based alliances with each other if there is an imminent risk such as the criminalization of abortion or political opportunity such as the election of a female-friendly parliament. So women find it easier to rally if they pursue political goals that are intersectional, that create an awareness about the different forms and degrees of oppression that women are exposed to due to their various class positions or ethnic group affiliations. In my own research as to forming of women's alliances in Turkey, I found that armed conflicts and wars and the accompanying masculinist points of view, such as nationalism and militarism, have a negative impact on forming such a solidarity-based organizations among women. Women's policies are pushed to the background. There's more nationalism and militarism. That is to say, societal priorities are shifting, and thus societal resources are possibly used differently. Move away from caring institutions for people in need of care, and they're invested more in the police, the military, or security services. Societal polarization that often happens in such a context may have a negative impact on the forming of such women's policy movements and broad-based social and societal alliances. In Austria, as far as I know, there's a certain political process that constitutes a comparable obstacle to the development of societal solidarity and is threatening to undermine it in the long term. This process is called securitization, and this means that societal concerns are now interpreted as a question of public order and national security. This process of securitization can be seen in politics and also in migration. These societal phenomena are seen as security political risks, and they are thus combated. But it would be naive to believe that this securitization only refers to one specific or special area of politics, namely migration and refugees. We can assume that there's a political spillover where this idea of security is slowly pervading all walks of society. As far as a coexistence in solidarity is concerned, we require a feminist understanding of security. This is a widely accepted idea of security, so this repressive idea of security is now opposed by this. So security is seen as a collective or societal trust that care and solidarity will be granted to all members of society. And such a non-repressive and care-giving understanding of security, we need to, first of all, develop a different image of man that we have as a society. People are vulnerable and interdependent, and we need care and solidarity of our fellow human beings in order to be able to live and die in dignity. It is this human vulnerability and the interpersonal interdependence that is the basis of our political struggles for a corresponding social order. Our democracy that is currently attacked by right-wing populists can be redesigned along these new feminist ideals. Traditional theories are based on an autonomous subject that is independent of other people and is self-sufficient. This distorted image of man is opposed by human vulnerability and dependence by feminists. So feminist John Tronto, for example, wrote that autonomy is not a natural human condition, but the vision and the goal of a caring democracy. It is these feminist ideas on human vulnerability, on security as a societal trust to be cared for and looked after at any time, and democracy as a caring practice in order to achieve equality and emancipation can be considered as a basis for forming broad-based societal alliances. Women, feminists, and the long history of producing maybe not painless, but indispensable alliances and solidarity can be seen as a political guideline for progressive political forces, which, together with women, can ensure that these political shifts in interpersonal and institutional carelessness can be combated and fought against. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank. Ayşe Dursun, danke vielmals.
Thank you very much, Ayşe Dursun. Thank you for this political science study and talking about the importance of alliances. These alliances are really important for progressive societal policies based on feminism. Thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to say thank you Well, I've just received pictures of the full rooms, and well, there are a lot of people also listening eagerly in the second room of the Parliament, so thank you very much for honoring us with your presence in this other room as well. I'd like to thank all of you who are following us on the live stream. I think it is great that the organizers have managed to ensure that the Austrian Broadcasting Authority is also broadcasting this live, so thank you very much. This is a special token of appreciation for the former President of the National Council, Barbara-Prammer.
And we have seen that the activity of Barbara-Prammer has gone way beyond her political activities. Of course, we need allies, and of course, the alliances need our support, and thus I would like to talk about an election event that will be extremely important for those in gainful employment. Spoiler alert, most of them will be women. We're talking about the elections to the Chamber of Labor all over Austria. Thus, we decided, also in the framework of this Barbara-Prammer-Symposium, to give the floor to very important representatives. We would like to give the floor to Renate Anderl, the head of the Chamber of Labor. Unfortunately, she cannot be with us in person, but she sent us a little video. Ladies and gentlemen, I would be very delighted to be with you today, because the more women stand up for other women, for women's concerns and issues, the stronger every single woman in our country becomes. And I would also like to take part, because this is the 10th symposium commemorating Barbara-Prammer, and because we are celebrating her 70th birthday this year. We all miss her very much, because our fight for women's rights is far from over. In this fight, we, the women in our country, in Barbara-Prammer, we had a reliable, steadfast and consistent comrade in arms. And there can never be enough of such comrades in arms. And I don't need to talk in this circle about the many areas in which women are still disadvantaged, discriminated against, and often excluded today. You know all this as well as I do, and I'm sure it makes you just as angry as me. But we all have a great responsibility here to turn our anger into something. We have a duty to give our anger a loud, strong, powerful, demanding voice. We have to demand what is ours and not ask for it. We owe it to the many women who can't do it themselves. I'm very glad that we are doing this again and again, even across ideological boundaries. Some may say that the fight for women's rights belongs to the century before last. Women already have all the opportunities anyway. A very clear no from me to this. We may live in a rich country, in a modern country, in the middle of the rich European Union, but that doesn't mean that this wealth brings us women equal opportunities and justice in the world of work and in everyday life. Equal opportunities are still a long way off. I would just like to remind you that we still are not paid equally, that we still have the main responsibility for family work. In all crises, it is always us women who feel the negative consequences first. Corona has demanded a lot from us women as employees in retail, as mothers of kindergarten or school children, as daughters, nieces, sisters of relatives in need of care. The price increases in many areas in recent years have hit us women particularly hard. This applies to the cost of energy, rent, food and school fees, as well as after school care and our own leisure time. However, the past few years have also been about very fundamental issues. We are noticing a strengthening of anti-democratic forces, and not just in other countries, but also in Austria. This also has a particularly negative impact on women, because anyone who doubts, opposes, or attacks democracy is also attacking women's rights. What we therefore need is a strong, loud, confident commitment to democracy. There will be many elections this year, Chamber of Labour, European Parliament, state parliaments, local councils. Let's use this opportunity to give democracy a proper feminist boost and make women's issues the dominant topics in these elections. Let's make sure that women participate particularly strongly in all ballots. Let's show the enemies of democracy very clearly that if they attack democracy, they will have to deal with us women, and we will not put up with it. Let's do that, because, to end with a quote from Barbara-Prammer, democracy and human rights are only as strong as people's willingness to defend them against attacks. I wish you a successful symposium in the interest of all women in our country, and would like to close with a heartfelt good luck. Thank you so much to Renate Anderl, and thank you so much for this very combative appeal to us women, defenders of democracy, not to let up, and to be demanding, using our voice in order to achieve participation in society, and to do it in a form that is visible at the helm of organizations. And thus I would like to introduce the Vice President of the European Parliament. Please give it up for Evelyn Regner, the Vice President of the European Parliament. Evelyn Regner, apart from the feminist democracy policy context here, so hats off to your role in the tough negotiations in money laundering. When it comes to the role of women in C-suites, it's incredible what you achieve each and every day in Brussels for us women in Europe. And this applause is for you. Thank you. We heard it during the two keynotes. There are two big overarching political topics nowadays, at least in Europe, anti-gender movements. This is the first one, the entire topic revolving around the organization of countering feminist and confidence policy, and secondly, the still unresolved question of care work that is still addressed by all of us. Before, we agreed on 2 rounds of questions. Thank you very much for your readiness to answer these questions. I think later on during the workshops we will really have to get time to get to the heart of the matter. So what is your take on these 2 topics that are very important without any doubt during election campaigns all over Europe, and what would be your appeal to women in Austria and in Europe? Thank you very much. I would also like to thank the 2 keynote speakers. Taking a look at history in a scientific way, this should sharpen our gaze. When it comes to tackling challenges, the year 2024 could be a celebration of democracy. We stand here confronted with enemies of democracies, riding roughshod over women's rights, and with all the elections, I think we can turn this into a very successful event when it comes to claiming our views in opposition to the enemies of democracy. And this is my first appeal and an excellent opportunity. And this has to do with radical solidarity with feminists, women and men alike. And especially Barbara Prammer is not only a symbol of this, but especially working for a democracy in action, for the democracy workshop. She has shown quite clearly that these two things go hand in glove. Social partnership, social partners, women and men alike. This in itself is the overarching aspect here, living natural solidarity, when it is about taking respective measures, improving care work, strengthening individual women's rights, and also strengthening the welfare state. So it's very important that especially female social partners are on board. So it's very important to concentrate on conventional partnerships and to also team up with the LGBTQ movement. And if we really open our eyes, we see so many partners, and it's only logical that we stick together. I can only invite you and call upon to celebrate this year and to be very open-minded and to allay the fears that are fomented by the enemies of feminism, the anti-democracy movement. We also have to fight it. And it's very important that we work together internationally at the European level. Evi Holzleitner said it so wonderfully in her introductory statement. We direct our gaze to Poland, where those who are fraught with great personal risk have taken to the streets in order to fight for the right to abortion, fighting for women's rights. So it's very important that we take them on board with their perseverance, with their courage. They can contribute to overthrow a horrible system. This should give us courage. And what should also give us courage is the following. If I talk about Iran, for example, and if we see what these fantastic, great women have achieved, and also their comrades in arms, their male comrades in arms, so this can only give us a boost to go into the future with courage and to see this election year as a year rife with opportunities. Just one example from care work. At a European level, we have achieved quite a lot. So Austria is lagging behind, absolutely. We have seen that we need a lot more childcare places. We have agreed this at the European level. So at the European level, we have achieved a lot. We have agreed on many excellent things, and what is lacking now is implementation. And this is why it is also so important to stick together much more at the European level. This would be my appeal to you, because I think in the afternoon we will have lots of opportunities to hear your inputs, taking a look around here, because I know that a lot of knowledge and know-how is assembled here in this room. Thank you so much, Evelyn Regner. And it is also possible to vote for this woman during the elections to the European Parliament. Thank you very much, Evelyn Regner, for pointing to the fact that feminist policy, according to the workers' song, if we fight, we also fight for men, also, of course, goes hand in glove with feminist men. And thus I'm very happy that we have two young feminist men here, the chairman of the young generation. And he's one of them. And they have been standing here at the back, so they haven't taken any seats from us. Dear Mr. Stich, dear Mr. Kögel, we need you. We women need you. And I know that you are feminist comrades in arms, and it's very good that you represent a young generation of men. Thank you very much for supporting this Barbara-Prammer-Symposium and for leaving the seats to us women. Now, we come to the part of the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium during which we want to bid our farewell to all those who have joined us via live stream. Now, we are going to continue work in the working groups. Thank you very much to all those of you who hopefully have seen and felt the spirit and the importance of the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium and who have felt the spirit and importance of democracy, of feminist democracy. Thank you very much for your interest. Now we'll have a lunch break here in the Parliament, where there will be a short lunch in the portico. Many employees will take care of you. We will not lose you, don't worry. And from the portico, all the ways will directly lead you to the rooms where the workshops will be held. And I hope that you have already registered for the respective working groups at the check-in. If there should be an imbalance, or maybe there will be a hall that doesn't offer an opportunity for receiving you, well, I think all the topics that are offered today are extremely important. It's about the economy, participation, it's about the labor market, it's about art, culture, and the big topic of AI. Dear Hilde Havlicek, as a former Minister of Culture and Science Minister, this might be highly interesting for you. After the workshop, there will be a summary about 3 p.m. I was told that maybe you can take a lunch or maybe a cup of coffee to the rooms. So there will be a short summary in the afternoon, a summary of the results. And one very special thing here, on the occasion of the 10th Barbara-Prammer-Symposium, at 5:30, there will be a reception also held in the portico, in order to celebrate this year of commemoration, and this will be hosted by Ruth Manninger, the chairwoman of the SPÖ responsible for women's affairs. Please give it up for her, for all the organization work she has put into this. So this is something that she just does on the side. This is not something that is done by an agency, but this is something that is done by her, and she has really put her heart and soul into this. I would like to bid my farewell. I would like to thank all the organizers of the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium. Barbara Prammer, we miss her so much, and at the same time, she truly has ignited a spark, and if she would be here today, she would be extremely happy, and she would maybe show what we miss most about her, her personal positive spirit and her smile. Very personal thank you. So please stay loyal to the Barbara-Prammer-Symposium, and I wish you a lot of fruitful work during the workshops in the afternoon.